The rain came down in steady sheets across northeast Portland, turning the asphalt into a mosaic of dark puddles that reflected the gray October sky. Derek Thompson guided his Harley-Davidson Street Glide into the parking lot of a Chevron Extra Mile gas station on 122nd Avenue, the rumble of his engine cutting through the sound of rainfall. At 34 years old, Derek had been riding the open roads of America for nearly 3 years now, ever since his divorce finalized, and the custody battle left him with nothing but supervised visitation rights to his daughter, 9-year-old Amanda. The biker lifestyle suited him in ways he never expected. No ties, no responsibilities beyond keeping his bike maintained and finding the next town where he could pick up mechanical work for cash. His leather jacket was worn and weathered, decorated with patches from rallies he'd attended from Sturgis to Daytona Beach. His beard had grown long and unkempt, streaked with premature gray that made him look older than his years. Derek killed the engine and swung his leg over the bike, stretching his back after 4 hours of riding through the rain. He'd left Eugene that morning with no particular destination in mind, just the familiar pull of the road calling him forward. Portland wasn't supposed to be a stop, just a place to refuel and grab some coffee before continuing north toward Washington State. The temperature hovered around 52 degrees, and the damp cold seeped through his jeans despite his chaps. As he began unscrewing his gas cap, Derek noticed her. A small figure standing near the edge of the gas station property, partially hidden behind a newspaper dispenser. She was a little girl, couldn't have been more than 7 years old, wearing a thin pink jacket that was completely inadequate for the weather. Her blonde hair hung in wet strands around her face, and even from 20 feet away, Derek could see she was shivering. Something about the way she stood there, motionless, watching him, sent an uncomfortable prickle down his spine. Kids didn't just hang around gas stations in the rain. Where were her parents? Derek tried to ignore her, focusing on filling his tank. The numbers on the pump climbed slowly as gasoline flowed into his Harley, but when he glanced back toward the newspaper dispenser, the girl had moved closer. She was now standing just 15 feet away, staring at him with an intensity that made him deeply uneasy. "Hey, kid!" Derek called out, his voice gruff. "Where's your mom or dad?" The girl didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took another step closer, and that's when Derek saw it clearly. A dark purple bruise circling her left eye, extending down onto her cheek. The discoloration was at least a few days old, fading to yellow-green around the edges. His stomach turned. "Mister," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain, "I need your help." Derek's first instinct was to look around for an adult, for someone responsible for this child. The gas station parking lot was nearly empty except for a silver Honda Civic at one of the other pumps and a delivery truck idling near the convenience store entrance. None of the people he could see seemed to be looking for a lost child. The pump clicked off, indicating his tank was full. Derek replaced the nozzle and screwed his gas cap back on, buying himself a few seconds to think. Every fiber of his being told him to get on his bike and ride away. He'd spent 3 years running from responsibility, from the pain of being labeled an unfit father, from the crushing weight of his failures. The last thing he needed was to get involved with someone else's problems. But the girl was walking toward him now, her small sneakers splashing through puddles, her eyes, one swollen and discolored, one clear blue, locked on his face with desperate hope. "Please," she whispered as she reached him, "I have money." From the pocket of her pink jacket, she pulled out a crumpled wad of bills. Her small hands shook as she unfolded them, a $10 bill, a 5, and several ones. She counted them carefully, her lips moving silently, then held them out to him. $15, she said. "It's all I have, but I need you to take me away from here." Derek stared at the money, then at the little girl's bruised face. His mouth went dry. "Kid, I can't. Where do you live? Where are your parents?" My house is 3 blocks that way. She pointed east down 122nd Avenue. My mommy is at work. She works at the hospital. She's a nurse and she has to work double shifts. The words came out in a rush, rehearsed, as if she'd been preparing exactly what to say. But my mommy's boyfriend, he's there. His name is Greg. He watches me when mommy works. The bruise around her eye suddenly made horrible sense. Derek felt his jaw clench, anger rising hot in his chest. Did Greg do that to your eye? The girl nodded slowly, and Derek saw tears beginning to well up. He gets really mad sometimes. Yesterday he got mad because I spilled juice on the couch. He hit me really hard. And this morning, her voice dropped to a whisper. This morning he said, if I tell my mommy what happened, he'll do something worse. He said he'll make sure I can't tell anyone anything ever again. Derek's hands balled into fists. For a moment he couldn't speak, couldn't think past the white-hot rage building inside him. He thought of his own daughter, Amanda. If anyone ever laid a hand on her, if anyone ever threatened her. What's your name? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Chloe, she said. Chloe Mitchell. Okay, Chloe. Derek ran a hand through his wet hair, trying to force his mind to work through the shock and anger. Listen to me very carefully. I'm not going to take you away from here, not the way you're thinking, but I am going to help you. Do you understand? Chloe's face crumpled with disappointment. Please, mister. I don't want to go back there. I'm scared. Greg said he's going to... I know, sweetheart. I know you're scared. Derek crouched down, so he was at eye level with the little girl. Rain poured over both of them, but neither seemed to notice anymore. But if I just take you and leave, that's kidnapping. That's illegal, and it would make things worse. What we need to do is call the police and tell them what's happening to you. But Greg said the police won't believe me, Chloe protested, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. He said kids lie all the time and nobody listens. That's not true. That's what bad people say to scare kids into staying quiet. Derek placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. But I'm going to make sure someone listens. I promise you that. Chloe looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for trustworthiness. Derek wondered what she saw, a rough-looking biker with a weathered face and hard eyes, someone who probably looked more dangerous than protective. But something in his expression must have convinced her, because she slowly nodded. Okay, she whispered. Derek stood up and pulled out his cell phone, but Chloe's small hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Wait, she said urgently. Greg knows I left. I snuck out while he was sleeping, but he might wake up. If he sees police cars, if he knows I told someone. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Derek understood the implications. If they called the police right now and Greg saw them coming, he might run, or worse, he might do something desperate. Is there somewhere you can stay, someone you trust? Derek asked. Chloe shook her head. My grandma lives in Seattle, my mummy's friends. I don't really know them. And mommy doesn't know about Greg. She thinks he's nice because he's different when she's home. Derek felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders like a physical burden. This wasn't his problem. He could call 911, wait with the kid until someone official showed up, then ride away and forget any of this ever happened. That's what the old Derek, the Derek who'd spent 3 years running, would have done. But as he looked at Chloe Mitchell, shivering in the rain with a black eye and $15 clutched in her small hand, he knew he couldn't do that. For the first time in 3 years, Derek felt something crack open inside his chest. Some sealed-off chamber where his sense of responsibility and protection used to live. All right, he said, making a decision that would change everything. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go inside this gas station where it's warm and dry. I'm going to buy you some hot chocolate, and we're going to figure this out together. But Chloe, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Chloe looked at the money in her hand, then back at Derek. Slowly, she nodded and tucked the bills back into her pocket. Derek led her toward the gas station entrance, placing himself between her and the direction of her house, a protective instinct kicking in that he thought he'd lost years ago. As they walked through the automatic doors into the fluorescent-lit warmth of the Extra Mile convenience store, Derek pulled out his phone again. He needed information. He needed to understand exactly how to handle this situation without making things worse for Chloe. And most of all, he needed to figure out why, after 3 years of running from every responsibility in his life, he was suddenly willing to stop running for the sake of a 7-year-old girl he'd met 5 minutes ago. The convenience store clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, glanced up from her magazine as they entered. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of the drenched biker and the small, bruised child, but she didn't say anything. Derek guided Chloe to a corner booth near the coffee station, away from the windows. "Sit here," he told her gently. "I'll be right back." He walked to the counter and addressed the clerk. "Hot chocolate for the kid, and coffee for me. Black." While the clerk prepared the drinks, Derek stepped toward the front window and looked out at the parking lot. Rain continued to fall in heavy sheets, turning the afternoon into premature twilight. Somewhere 3 blocks away, a man named Greg was potentially waking up to find the child he'd abused had disappeared. Derek didn't know what would happen when that realization hit, but he knew they didn't have much time. He returned to the booth with the drinks and slid in across from Chloe. She wrapped her small hands around the hot chocolate cup, seeking its warmth. Up close, in better light, Derek could see more than just the black eye. There were finger-shaped bruises on her upper arms, visible where her jacket sleeve had ridden up. His jaw tightened. "Chloe, I need you to tell me everything," Derek said quietly. "When did this start? How long has Greg been hurting you?" Chloe took a sip of her hot chocolate, her eyes downcast. "Mommy started dating him 6 months ago. At first he was really nice. He brought me toys and played games with me, but then he moved in 3 months ago and he started getting mad about little things. The first time he hit me was because I was too loud when he was watching TV. He said I gave him a headache." "Did he hit you with his hand or with something else?" "His hand, mostly. Sometimes his belt." Chloe's voice was barely a whisper now. "He always says he's sorry after. He says he doesn't mean to, but I make him so angry. He says if I was a better kid, he wouldn't have to discipline me." Derek felt sick. The classic abuser's script, blaming the victim, especially a child who couldn't possibly understand that none of this was her fault. "And your mother doesn't know?" "She works so much," Chloe said, and there was a note of defensive loyalty in her voice. "She's trying to pay for our apartment and everything. Greg only gets mad when she's not there. When Mommy's home, he's different. He's nice again. I tried to tell her once, but Greg heard me trying and he..." She stopped, fear flashing across her face. "He what?" "He locked me in the closet for the whole night. It was really dark and I couldn't breathe good. He said if I ever tried to tell again, he'd do worse." Derek had to take a moment to control his breathing, to push down the rage that threatened to overwhelm his ability to think clearly. He'd met men like Greg before, cowards who took out their frustrations on people smaller and weaker than themselves. The motorcycle community had its share of rough characters, but even among outlaw bikers, there was an unspoken code. You never hurt kids. "Okay," Derek said finally, his voice steady despite the storm of emotion inside him. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to call Child Protective Services. They're the people who handle situations like this. They'll send someone out to make sure you're safe." "What about Mommy?" Chloe asked, worry creasing her small forehead. "Will she get in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. Your mom isn't the one who hurt you. But she needs to know what's been happening so she can protect you." Chloe's eyes filled with tears again. "But she loves Greg. What if she doesn't believe me? What if she chooses him instead of me?" It was a heartbreaking question, one that revealed just how much this little girl had been living in fear and isolation. Derek reached across the table and placed his large, calloused hand over her small one. "If your mother is the woman you've described, a woman who works double shifts to take care of you, then she loves you more than anything in this world. And when she finds out what Greg has done, she's going to do everything she can to keep you safe. I promise you that." He wasn't sure if he could keep that promise. He'd seen enough broken families and failed systems to know that sometimes things didn't work out the way they should. But Chloe needed hope right now, and Derek was determined to do whatever it took to make that hope a reality. Derek pulled out his phone and searched for the Oregon Department of Human Services Child Protective Services hotline. His finger hovered over the call button, but before he could press it, Chloe spoke again. "Mister, what's your name?" "Derek. Derek Thompson." "Derek," Chloe repeated, as if testing the name. "Are you going to leave after you call them?" The question struck Derek harder than he expected. The honest answer was yes. That had been his plan. Make the call, wait for the authorities, give a statement, then get back on his bike and ride away. That was the smart thing to do, the safe thing to do. He had no legal obligation to this child beyond reporting what he'd witnessed. But as he looked at Chloe's bruised face, at the desperate hope in her eyes, Derek realized he couldn't do that. For reasons he didn't fully understand, this little girl had chosen him out of everyone she could have approached. She'd offered him $15, probably every cent she had in the world, because she'd seen something in him that made her think he could save her. And maybe, just maybe, she was right. "No," Derek heard himself say, "I'm not going to leave you alone. Not until I know you're safe." Chloe's expression transformed. The fear and desperation that had tightened her features melted into something like relief, like gratitude, like trust. She squeezed his hand with her small fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. Derek pressed the call button. The woman who answered the Child Protective Services hotline had a calm, professional voice that immediately put Derek somewhat at ease. He gave his name, his location, and a brief description of the situation. The woman, who identified herself as Patricia, asked him several specific questions about Chloe's injuries, the timeline of abuse, and whether the child was in immediate danger. "The boyfriend doesn't know where we are right now," Derek explained, keeping his voice low so Chloe wouldn't be frightened by the conversation. "But she lives 3 blocks from here, and he could start looking for her at any time." "I understand, Mr. Thompson. I'm going to dispatch a CPS caseworker and a police officer to your location immediately. It's very important that you stay where you are and keep the child safe until they arrive. Do not, under any circumstances, take the child to her residence or attempt to confront the alleged abuser yourself." "I wasn't planning to," Derek said, though part of him wanted to do exactly that, to ride over to Greg's house and make sure the bastard never hurt another child again. "The response team should be there within 20 to 30 minutes, Patricia continued. "In the meantime, try to keep the child calm and comfortable. You've done the right thing by calling us, Mr. Thompson." After hanging up, Derek relayed the information to Chloe, simplifying it into terms she could understand. "Some people are coming to help you. They're going to ask you questions about what happened, and they're going to make sure you don't have to go back to Greg." "Where will I go?" Chloe asked, worry creeping back into her voice. "I don't know yet, but somewhere safe." They waited. Derek bought Chloe a package of cookies from the gas station's limited selection, and she nibbled on them slowly, her appetite clearly diminished by stress. The rain outside showed no signs of letting up, drumming steadily against the gas station's roof and windows. Other customers came and went. A businessman in a suit, a young couple laughing together, a construction worker in muddy boots, all of them oblivious to the drama unfolding in the corner booth. Derek found himself studying Chloe, trying to reconcile her small, vulnerable presence with the courage it must have taken to approach a stranger and ask for help. At 7 years old, She should have been worrying about homework and playground games, not escaping from an abuser with her life savings clutched in her pocket. "Derek!" Chloe's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Yeah, kiddo? Do you have kids?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Derek was quiet for a moment before answering. "Yeah, I have a daughter. Her name is Amanda. She's 9. "Where is she?" "She lives with her mother in California. I don't get to see her very much." "Why not?" It was an innocent question, but it cut deep. How did you explain to a 7-year-old that you'd made mistakes, that you'd let anger and alcohol consume you, that the court had decided you were a danger to your own child? How did you explain that sometimes the system that was supposed to protect families ended up tearing them apart? "It's complicated," Derek said finally, "but I miss her every day." Chloe seemed to consider this. "I bet she misses you too." Derek felt his throat tighten. He hadn't allowed himself to think too deeply about Amanda in months, had built walls around those thoughts because they hurt too much. But sitting here with Chloe, waiting for help to arrive, those walls were starting to crack. "I hope so," he said quietly. 27 minutes after Derek's call, a dark blue sedan pulled into the gas station parking lot, followed closely by a marked police cruiser. Derek felt Chloe tense beside him as they watched through the window. "It's okay," he assured her. "These are the people who are going to help." A woman in her mid-30s emerged from the sedan, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing what Derek assumed was her attempt at approachable professional attire: slacks, a blazer, and a warm smile. The police officer who got out of the cruiser was younger, maybe late 20s, with a serious expression and one hand resting casually near his service weapon. Derek and Chloe met them at the entrance. The woman extended her hand to Derek first. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Valerie Kramer, caseworker with Oregon Department of Human Services. This is Officer Brandon Hayes with Portland Police Bureau." Derek shook hands with both of them, acutely aware of how he must look, a rough biker in soaking wet leathers, standing protectively near a bruised child. If the situation were reversed, he'd be suspicious of himself too. But Valerie's attention quickly shifted to Chloe. She crouched down, bringing herself to the child's eye level, and spoke in a gentle voice. "Hi there. You must be Chloe. My name is Valerie. I know this is scary, but I'm here to help you. Is that okay?" Chloe glanced at Derek as if seeking permission. He nodded encouragingly. "It's okay. You can talk to her." "Can Derek stay?" Chloe asked Valerie, her small hand reaching for Derek's. Valerie exchanged a look with Officer Hayes, then nodded. "Of course. Derek can stay with us while we talk. Why don't we all sit down?" They returned to the corner booth with Valerie and Chloe on one side and Derek and Officer Hayes on the other. The gas station clerk watched from behind her counter, clearly fascinated by the unfolding drama. Valerie opened her portfolio and took out a form and a pen. "Chloe, I need to ask you some questions about what's been happening at home. I know it might be hard to talk about, but it's really important that you tell me the truth. You're not in trouble, and nobody is going to be mad at you, okay?" Chloe nodded, her hand still gripping Derek's tightly. "Can you tell me about your eye? How did you get that bruise?" "Greg hit me," Chloe said softly. "Yesterday, I spilled juice on the couch and he got really angry." "Did he hit you with his hand or with something else?" "His hand. He slapped me really hard, and then I fell and hit my head on the coffee table." Valerie wrote this down carefully. "Has Greg hit you other times?" "Yes, lots of times." "Can you show me if you have bruises anywhere else?" Chloe hesitated, then pulled up her jacket sleeves to reveal the finger-shaped bruises on her upper arms. Valerie's expression remained professionally neutral, but Derek saw her jaw tighten slightly. Officer Hayes leaned forward to get a better look, his hand moving to the small camera clipped to his uniform. "I'm going to take some pictures, okay, Chloe?" the officer said. "These pictures will help us make sure you're protected." After documenting Chloe's visible injuries, Valerie continued her questions. She asked about the timeline of abuse, about Chloe's mother and her work schedule, about Greg's behavior, and whether he'd ever hurt Chloe's mother. With each answer, a clearer picture emerged of a child living in constant fear, of a mother working too much to notice what was happening in her own home, and of an abuser who'd carefully cultivated a facade of normalcy. "Where is your mother right now, Chloe?" Valerie asked. "At work. She works at Providence Portland Medical Center. She's a nurse in the emergency room." Valerie made a note of this. "And Greg is at home?" Chloe nodded. "He was sleeping when I left, but that was a long time ago. He might be awake now." Officer Hayes spoke up. "We're going to need to contact the mother and potentially take Greg into custody. Ms. Kramer, what's your recommendation for the child's immediate placement?" This was the question Derek had been dreading. He knew how this worked. Chloe would be placed in emergency foster care while the investigation proceeded. She'd be taken away by strangers to an unfamiliar place, alone and frightened, while bureaucrats shuffled paperwork and her mother tried to comprehend the nightmare that had been unfolding under her nose. Valerie seemed to be considering the same thing. Given the circumstances and the child's clear statement of abuse, I'm recommending immediate removal from the home pending investigation. I'll need to contact emergency foster placement and see what's available." "No," Chloe said suddenly, her voice small but firm. "I don't want to go with strangers, please." She turned to Derek, tears streaming down her face. "Can't I stay with you?" Derek's heart clenched. "Sweetheart, I don't have a home. I've been living on the road. I can't." "Mr. Thompson," Valerie interrupted gently, "I understand Chloe has bonded with you, and that's natural given the circumstances. But our protocol requires placing her with certified foster parents or a family member." "Her grandmother is in Seattle," Derek offered. "Chloe mentioned her. We'll certainly explore that option, but it takes time to verify family placements. In the meantime, Chloe needs immediate safe housing." Derek looked at the little girl's tear-stained face, at the desperate plea in her eyes. He thought about Amanda, about all the times he'd let her down, all the times the system had told him he wasn't fit to be a father. Maybe they'd been right. Maybe he was just a broken-down biker with nothing to offer. But maybe this was his chance to be the person he should have been all along. "What if I stayed?" Derek said suddenly. "Not to take custody or anything like that, but just, what if I stuck around Portland while this gets sorted out? So Chloe knows there's at least one person she trusts nearby?" Valerie looked at him with surprise. "Mr. Thompson, you've already done a tremendous service by reporting this and staying with Chloe until we arrived. You're not obligated to—" "I know I'm not obligated, but I'm offering anyway." Officer Hayes studied Derek with the appraising look. "You got any wants or warrants we should know about? Any criminal history?" "No warrants. I've got a couple of misdemeanors from years ago, bar fights, drunk and disorderly, but nothing recent, nothing violent." Derek met the officer's gaze steadily. "Look, I know how this looks. I know what you see when you look at me. But I'm not asking to take responsibility for her. I'm just asking to be someone stable in her life while this mess gets figured out." Valerie and Officer Hayes exchanged another look, communicating in that wordless way that professionals developed. Finally, Valerie nodded slowly. "Mr. Thompson, I can't make any promises, but if you're willing to provide your contact information and make yourself available for any questions during our investigation, I think your presence could be beneficial for Chloe's emotional stability." She turned to Chloe. "How would you feel about going to a foster home if you knew Derek was still here in Portland and could visit you?" Chloe's grip on Derek's hand loosened slightly. "He could visit? If the foster family agrees, and if Mr. Thompson passes a basic background check, yes." It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Derek saw the calculation happening behind Chloe's eyes, weighing her fear of strangers against the promise that she wouldn't be completely alone. "Okay," she said finally, her voice wavering, "but Derek has to promise he'll come see me." Derek squeezed her hand. "I promise, kiddo. I'm not going anywhere." The next 2 hours were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and coordination. Officer Hayes left to confront Greg at the residence, taking a backup unit with him. Valerie contacted emergency foster services and found a placement with a family named the Pattersons, who lived in southeast Portland. She also reached out to Providence Portland Medical Center and had Chloe's mother, Jessica Mitchell, paged for an urgent family matter. Derek provided his information, including his California driver's license, his cell phone number, and the registration for his Harley. When Valerie asked where he'd be staying, Derek realized he hadn't thought that far ahead. "I'll find a motel," he said, "somewhere nearby." Valerie gave him a list of affordable options in the area, then excused herself to make more calls. While they waited, Derek and Chloe sat together in the booth, not talking much, but finding comfort in each other's presence. "Derek?" Chloe said after a long silence. "Yeah? Thank you for not leaving me." "You don't have to thank me, sweetheart." "But I do, because you didn't have to help me. You could have just driven away." Derek thought about that, about the man he'd been 3 hours ago, riding into Portland with no intention of stopping for more than gas and coffee. That man would have driven away. That man had been running from responsibility and connection for 3 years. But something had changed. Maybe it was seeing his own daughter's age reflected in Chloe's eyes. Maybe it was recognizing that he had the power to help someone when he'd felt powerless for so long. Or maybe it was just that he'd been running for long enough. "Yeah, well," Derek said gruffly, uncomfortable with emotional vulnerability. "Sometimes people surprise themselves." Jessica Mitchell arrived at the gas station 35 minutes later, still wearing her scrubs, her face pale with shock and fear. Valerie met her outside first, presumably to brief her on the situation before she saw Chloe. Derek watched through the window as the woman's face crumpled, as she brought her hands to her mouth in horror as she seemed to sway on her feet before Valerie steadied her. When she finally came inside and saw her daughter, Jessica let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. "Chloe!" Chloe ran to her mother, and they collided in a fierce embrace. Jessica was crying, Chloe was crying, and Derek had to look away, his own emotions too raw and close to the surface. "I'm so sorry, baby," Jessica kept saying. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Valerie gave them a few minutes together before gently intervening. "Ms. Mitchell, we need to discuss Chloe's immediate placement and the investigation process." The conversation that followed was difficult. Jessica wanted to take Chloe home, wanted to promise she'd kicked Greg out and would never let him near her daughter again. But Valerie explained that protocol required Chloe to be placed in foster care pending a full investigation, including interviews with teachers, doctors, and neighbors. It wasn't about punishing Jessica. It was about ensuring Chloe's safety while they built a case against Greg. Jessica fought it at first, argued that she could protect her own daughter. But Valerie was firm, and eventually the reality of the situation sank in. Jessica would cooperate fully with the investigation, would terminate her relationship with Greg immediately, and would do whatever was necessary to get her daughter back safely. Throughout all of this, Derek stood quietly to the side, feeling like an intruder in a family crisis. But every few minutes, Chloe would look over at him, as if reassuring herself that he was still there. Officer Hayes returned with news that Greg Holloway had been arrested and charged with multiple counts of child abuse. They'd found evidence in the house that corroborated Chloe's story, including the blood-stained coffee table she'd mentioned. Greg had tried to run when he saw the police cars approaching, which hadn't helped his case. As evening fell and the rain finally began to lighten, a couple in their 50s arrived at the gas station. Robert and Christine Patterson were experienced foster parents who'd been approved for emergency placements. They had kind faces and gentle voices, and they brought a bag of clothes and toiletries they kept on hand for situations like this. Saying goodbye was harder than Derek expected. Chloe clung to him, making him promise 3 more times that he would come visit her. "I'll come tomorrow," Derek assured her, "as soon as Ms. Kramer says it's okay." "You promise?" "I promise." Christine Patterson placed a gentle hand on Chloe's shoulder. "We have a nice room for you, sweetheart, and we have a dog named Biscuit who loves meeting new people. Would you like to meet Biscuit?" The mention of a dog seemed to help. Chloe wiped her eyes and nodded, allowing herself to be led toward the Pattersons' car, but she turned back one last time. "Derek, keep my $15 safe. I'll want it back when this is over." Derek had forgotten about the money, which Chloe had given to Valerie for safekeeping. "You got it, kiddo." After they drove away, Derek stood in the gas station parking lot, suddenly exhausted. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and cool. Streetlights were beginning to flicker on, and traffic on 122nd Avenue was picking up with the evening rush hour. Jessica Mitchell approached him, her eyes red from crying. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't helped her..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Any decent person would have done the same," Derek said. "But you did more than just call the police. You stayed with her. You made her feel safe." Jessica pulled a card from her purse and handed it to him. "This is my number. Please, if there's anything I can ever do for you." Derek took the card. "Just take care of your daughter. That's all I need." After Jessica left to meet with more investigators, Derek was finally alone with Valerie Kramer. She was packing up her portfolio, looking as tired as he felt. "You did a good thing today, Mr. Thompson," she said. "A lot of people would have just kept driving." "Yeah, well, I almost did. But you didn't. That's what matters." Valerie handed him a business card. "Call me tomorrow morning. I'll let you know when you can visit Chloe, assuming your background check doesn't raise any red flags." "It won't. I believe you." Valerie paused, then added, "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" Derek shrugged. "You said you have a daughter in California. Maybe this is a sign that it's time to stop running and start rebuilding." Her words hit home more than Derek wanted to admit. "Maybe," was all he said. After Valerie drove away, Derek stood alone in the parking lot next to his Harley. The bike looked the same as it had that morning, a faithful machine ready to carry him anywhere he wanted to go. But Derek didn't feel the same. Something fundamental had shifted inside him, and he knew there was no going back to the person he'd been before he met Chloe Mitchell. He pulled out his phone and searched for motels near the gas station. The Restwell Inn, 3 blocks away, had decent reviews and weekly rates. Derek started his bike and rode there through streets still wet from rain, the city lights reflecting off puddles like scattered stars. The motel room was small and generic, with floral bedspreads and a TV bolted to the dresser. Derek sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out his wallet, looking at the photo he kept hidden behind his driver's license. Amanda, smiling at the camera, missing her 2 front teeth. She'd been 6 when that photo was taken. She was 9 now, and he'd missed so much. Derek picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found his ex-wife's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. It was late, probably too late to call. And what would he even say? That he'd helped a stranger's daughter, and it made him realize what a terrible father he'd been to his own. He put the phone down without calling. Some conversations required more courage than he could muster tonight. Instead, Derek lay back on the motel bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Chloe's bruised face, heard her small voice offering him $15, felt her hand gripping his with desperate trust. He'd made her a promise. He'd told her he wouldn't leave. And for the first time in 3 years, Derek Thompson intended to keep a promise. Derek's phone rang at 7:30 the next morning, pulling him from a restless sleep. He grabbed it from the nightstand, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar room, before the events of yesterday came flooding back. "Thompson," he answered, his voice rough. "Mr. Thompson, this is Valerie Kramer. I hope I'm not calling too early." "No, I'm awake." Derek sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "What's the news?" "Well, I ran your background check first thing this morning. You came back clean, as you said you would. Just those old misdemeanors, nothing that disqualifies you from contact with Chloe." Derek felt tension he hadn't realized he'd been holding release from his shoulders. "So I can see her?" "Yes. I spoke with the Pattersons this morning, and they're comfortable with supervised visitation. I also spoke with Chloe herself, and she's been asking about you since she woke up." There was a smile in Valerie's voice. "You made quite an impression on that little girl. When can I come by? Would this afternoon work? Say around 2 o'clock? That will give Chloe some time to settle in, and you some time to, well, to prepare yourself for what this means." "What do you mean?" Valerie's tone became more serious. "Mr. Thompson, I want to be clear about something. What you're doing is admirable, but it's also going to be complicated. This case is going to involve court proceedings, testimony, possibly a trial if Greg Holloway doesn't take a plea deal. If you position yourself as a stable presence in Chloe's life, you may end up being called on to fulfill that role for some time. Are you prepared for that?" Derek thought about his Harley parked outside, about the open road that had been his only companion for 3 years. Was he prepared to give that up? To stay in one place, to be responsible for showing up day after day? "We've made her a promise," Derek said finally. "I'm prepared to keep it." "All right then. The Pattersons live at 4782 Southeast Division Street. I'll text you the full address and my cell number. I'll meet you there at 2 to supervise the first visit." After hanging up, Derek sat on the edge of the motel bed, processing what he'd just committed to. His stomach growled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since yesterday's gas station coffee. He showered, changed into his least worn set of clothes, and headed out to find breakfast. The neighborhood around the Restwell Inn was a mix of residential homes and small businesses. Derek found a diner called The Griddle a few blocks away, its neon sign advertising "Best Pancakes in Portland" in faded red letters. Inside, the place was busy with the morning crowd. Construction workers grabbing coffee before their shifts, elderly couples reading newspapers over eggs and bacon, a few students with laptops taking advantage of free Wi-Fi. Derek slid into a booth and ordered coffee and the breakfast special. While waiting for his food, he pulled out his phone and did something he'd been avoiding. He researched Child Protective Services cases, foster care systems, and what happened to children who reported abuse. The statistics were sobering. Many abused children ended up cycling through multiple foster placements. Family reunification was the goal, but it could take months or even years, depending on the circumstances. Some children never returned to their families. Some aged out of the system without ever finding permanent stability. Derek thought about Chloe spending years in temporary homes, always wondering when the next move would come, never feeling truly safe or settled. His jaw clenched around his coffee mug. His food arrived, scrambled eggs, hash browns, bacon and toast, but his appetite had diminished. He ate mechanically, his mind elsewhere. When the waitress came to refill his coffee, she noticed his distraction. "Everything okay with the food, honey?" She was in her 60s, with kind eyes and hair dyed an improbable shade of red. "Food's fine," Derek said. "Just got a lot on my mind." "Man troubles or money troubles?" she asked with the familiarity of someone who'd been serving coffee and advice for decades. Despite himself, Derek smiled slightly. "Kid troubles, actually. Those are the worst kind," she said sympathetically. "But also the most important kind. Kids have a way of putting everything else in perspective." After she moved on to other customers, Derek finished his breakfast and paid his bill, leaving a generous tip. He spent the rest of the morning riding around Portland, getting a feel for the city. He rode through the vibrant Mississippi Avenue district with its colorful murals and quirky boutiques, past the historic homes of the Hawthorne district, along the waterfront where the Willamette River reflected the autumn morning light. It was a beautiful city, Derek had to admit. Different from the small California town where he'd grown up, different from the endless highways he'd been traveling. Portland had character, a sense of community, even with its rough edges. He could see why people chose to put down roots here. At 1:45, Derek pulled up to the address Valerie had texted him. The Patterson house was a well-maintained craftsman-style home with a neat front yard and a ramp leading to the front porch. Accessibility for Robert Patterson's wheelchair, Derek guessed. Valerie's car was already parked in the driveway. Derek took a deep breath before walking up to the front door. He'd faced down aggressive drunks in biker bars, had ridden through thunderstorms and mechanical breakdowns, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this nervous. Christine Patterson answered his knock with a warm smile. "You must be Derek. Please, come in." The house's interior was cozy and lived in, with family photos on the walls and comfortable furniture that showed signs of use. A golden retriever, presumably Biscuit, trotted over to investigate Derek, tail wagging. "Chloe's been watching for you for the past 20 minutes, Christine said, leading Derek into the living room, where Valerie was already seated. "She'll be so happy you're here." "How's she doing?" Derek asked. "Better than expected, honestly. She had some nightmares last night, but this morning she ate a good breakfast and even played with Biscuit in the backyard. Robert's out there with her now." Through the sliding glass doors, Derek could see Chloe throwing a tennis ball for the dog while a man in a wheelchair looked on. She was wearing new clothes, jeans and a purple sweater, and her hair had been pulled back in a neat ponytail. The bruise around her eye looked darker in the daylight, but her expression was lighter than it had been yesterday. When Chloe spotted Derek through the glass, her whole face lit up. She said something to Robert, then ran toward the house, the dog bounding after her. She burst through the sliding door and launched herself at Derek, hugging him around the waist. "You came! You really came!" Derek awkwardly patted her shoulder, unsure how to respond to such unreserved affection. "Course I came. I promised, didn't I?" Robert Patterson wheeled himself inside, extending his hand to Derek. "Robert Patterson, good to meet you, son. Christine and I want to thank you for what you did for this young lady." "Just did what anyone should do," Derek said, shaking the offered hand. "Maybe what anyone should do," Robert said meaningfully, "but not what everyone does do. That makes a difference." Valerie suggested they all sit down, and the adults arranged themselves around the living room while Chloe stayed close to Derek, eventually settling on the couch right next to him. Biscuit laid down at her feet, apparently having decided Chloe was worth protecting. "Chloe," Valerie began, "Derek's going to visit you regularly, but we need to establish some ground rules. These rules aren't because anyone did anything wrong. They're just to make sure everything stays appropriate and safe, okay?" Chloe nodded seriously. "First, visits will happen here at the Patterson house or in public places, and either Christine, Robert, or I will be present. Second, if you want to talk to Derek between visits, he can call the house phone, and you can talk with one of the Pattersons nearby. Third, we'll check in every few days to make sure everyone's comfortable with the arrangement. Does all that sound okay to you?" "That sounds okay," Chloe said. Then to Derek, "Will you come visit a lot?" "As often as they'll let me," Derek assured her. "Actually," Valerie interjected, "I wanted to talk to you about that, Mr. Thompson. Could we speak privately for a moment?" Derek followed Valerie to the Pattersons' kitchen, where she turned to face him with a serious expression. "I need to be straight with you about something," Valerie said. "In my 15 years doing this job, I've never seen a situation quite like this. A stranger stepping in to provide stability for a child he has no legal or family connection to. It's highly unusual. Is that a problem? Derek asked warily. Not necessarily, but it raises questions. Why are you doing this, Mr. Thompson? And please give me an honest answer, because I need to know your motivations are appropriate. Derek had been expecting this question since yesterday, but he still didn't have a simple answer. I have a daughter I don't get to see, he said slowly. Lost custody 3 years ago because I was a mess, drinking too much, angry all the time. The court said I was unstable, and they were right. So I got on my bike and I ran. Spent 3 years going nowhere, avoiding everyone, avoiding responsibility. He paused, gathering his thoughts. When Chloe came up to me yesterday, I saw my daughter. Not literally. They don't even look alike. But I saw a kid who needed help, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like maybe I could be the kind of person who helps instead of the kind who runs away. Valerie studied him for a long moment. That's honest. I appreciate that. But I have to ask, have you been attending any AA meetings, therapy, anything to address the issues that cost you custody? No, Derek admitted. I've been clean for 2 years, but that's just through willpower. I haven't done the actual work. If you're serious about being in Chloe's life, even as a supportive friend, you need to do that work, not just for her, but for yourself and for your own daughter. The mention of Amanda sent a pang through Derek's chest. You think I should try to contact her? My daughter? I think you should try to become someone she'd be proud to know. Whether that leads to contact depends on a lot of factors I'm not qualified to advise on. But yes, I think the work you do on yourself could eventually open that door. It was the kind of advice Derek had been avoiding for 3 years. The suggestion that he needed to face his problems instead of outrunning them. But sitting in a stranger's kitchen, having just hugged a 7-year-old who trusted him for reasons he didn't fully understand, Derek found he couldn't run anymore. Okay, he said. What do I need to do? Valerie pulled a card from her bag. This is a therapist named Dr. Helen Yamamoto. She specializes in trauma, addiction, and family reunification. She's not cheap, but she's good. Tell her I referred you. Derek took the card. I'll call her. They returned to the living room, where Chloe had been entertaining Christine and Robert with a story about the dog. When she saw Derek, she immediately shifted her attention back to him. Derek, do you want to play fetch with me and Biscuit? For the next hour, Derek found himself in the Pattersons' backyard, throwing a tennis ball for an enthusiastic retriever, while Chloe provided a running commentary on Biscuit's personality, favorite toys, and tendency to steal socks. It was ordinary, domestic, completely unlike anything Derek had experienced in years, and it felt good. Christine brought out lemonade and cookies, and they sat on the patio while Biscuit flopped down in a patch of sun, exhausted from play. Chloe sat next to Derek, naturally leaning against his side, like they'd known each other for years instead of one day. Derek? She asked around a mouthful of cookie. Yeah, kiddo? Are you going to stay in Portland? Or do you have to go back to riding your motorcycle to other places? It was the question that had been hovering over everything. Derek looked at Valerie, who raised an eyebrow as if to say this was his decision to make. I'm staying, Derek said, for as long as you need me to. Chloe's smile was worth every uncertainty, every question about what he was doing with his life. Good, because the Pattersons are really nice, but I like having you here too. We like having you here too, sweetheart, Christine said warmly. The visit stretched into early evening. Robert told stories about his years as a high school shop teacher before a car accident put him in a wheelchair. Christine showed Chloe and Derek the room she'd prepared, full of books and stuffed animals and cheerful yellow walls. Valerie eventually excused herself, confident that the arrangement was working. When it was finally time for Derek to leave, Chloe walked him to the front door. You'll come back tomorrow? She asked. If that's okay with the Pattersons. It's fine with us, Robert assured him from his wheelchair. We think Chloe could use all the stability and support she can get right now. Derek crouched down to Chloe's level. I'll be back tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, for as long as you want me around. Promise. Promise. Chloe hugged him fiercely, and Derek found himself hugging back just as tightly. When had he gotten so attached to this kid? How had one chance encounter at a gas station led to this feeling of purpose he thought he'd lost forever? Riding back to the Restwell Inn as the sun set over Portland, Derek made a decision. He pulled into the parking lot of a small shopping center and found a payphone, one of the few still standing in the age of cell phones. He dialed a number he'd memorized years ago, but never called. It rang 4 times before a woman answered. Hello? Karen? Derek's voice was rough with emotion. It's me. It's Derek. There was a long pause, then, Derek, is everything okay? Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. Better than I've been in a long time, actually. I'm calling because I want to ask about Amanda. How is she? Another pause, longer this time. Derek could hear the suspicion and protectiveness in his ex-wife's silence. She's fine. Why are you asking? You haven't called in 2 years. I know, and I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for a lot of things. But Karen, I'm trying to do better. I'm trying to become someone she wouldn't be ashamed of. What brought this on? Derek almost laughed. How could he possibly explain? I helped a kid yesterday, a little girl who was in trouble, and it made me realize that I've been running away from being a father for too long. He could hear Karen's breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, she said, Derek, I can't just let you back into Amanda's life after you've been gone for so long. She's doing well now. She's stable. She has friends. She's doing great in school. I can't risk disrupting that. Derek's heart sank, but he understood. I'm not asking to see her tomorrow. I'm not asking for anything right now except to know that maybe someday, if I prove I've changed, there could be a chance. I don't know, Derek. You hurt us both so badly. I know I did. And I'm going to spend however long it takes making up for that. Karen, I'm in Portland. I'm staying here for a while. I'm getting help, therapy, the works. And when I'm ready, when I've done the work I should have done 3 years ago, I'd like to try to be part of Amanda's life again, even if it's just letters at first, or phone calls. Whatever you're comfortable with. Karen was quiet for so long that Derek thought she might have hung up. But finally, she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. Send me your address when you have one, a real address, not a motel, and send me the name of your therapist. If you stick with it for 6 months, actually stick with it. We'll talk about what comes next. It wasn't much, but it was more than Derek had dared hope for. Thank you, and Karen, tell Amanda. Tell her I love her, that I've always loved her, even when I was too messed up to show it properly. I will, Karen said softly. Then she hung up. Derek stood at the payphone for several minutes, processing the conversation. 6 months. He had to prove himself for 6 months before there was even a possibility of contact with his daughter. It seemed like an eternity, but compared to the 3 years he'd already wasted, it was nothing. He returned to his bike and rode back to the Restwell Inn, but instead of going to his room, he sat on the curb in the parking lot and called the number on the card Valerie had given him. A recorded message informed him that Dr. Helen Yamamoto's office hours were Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5, but he could leave a message for a callback. Dr. Yamamoto, my name is Derek Thompson. Valerie Kramer from DHS gave me your card. I need help with a lot of things, anger issues, alcohol, being a better person. I know it's late and this is a voicemail, but I wanted to call now before I lost my nerve. I'm in Portland and I'm ready to do the work. Please call me back. He left his number and hung up. Derek spent that night in his motel room researching AA meetings in Portland. There was one at a church 3 blocks away that met every Tuesday and Thursday evening. He marked it in his phone calendar. He also looked up apartment rentals, trying to figure out what he could afford if he found steady work. His savings from 3 years of mechanical odd jobs wouldn't last forever, especially if he was staying in one place. The next morning, Tuesday, Derek woke early and rode around Portland looking for motorcycle shops or garages that might need a mechanic. His third stop was a place called Bridgetown Cycles on Southeast Morrison Street. The owner, a grizzled man in his 60s named Chuck Brennan, looked over Derek's work history with interest. "You really worked at all these places?" Chuck asked, studying the list of repairs and customizations Derek had done over the years. "Every one of them. I'm good with bikes, any make or model. I'm also good with cars if you need that." Chuck scratched his chin thoughtfully. "I could use someone part-time to start, 20 hours a week, see how it goes. Pay is $15 an hour, cash. When can I start?" "How about now? I got a Ducati in the back that's been giving me fits. If you can diagnose it, the job's yours." Derek spent the next 2 hours with the Ducati, tracing an electrical problem that had stumped Chuck. When he finally identified the issue, a corroded connection in the wiring harness, Chuck was impressed enough to offer him 30 hours a week instead of 20. That afternoon, Derek visited Chloe at the Patterson house, as promised. She was waiting by the window again, and this time when he arrived, she had drawings to show him, pictures of Biscuit, of the house, of a stick-figure biker that was clearly supposed to be Derek. "You're really talented," Derek said, examining the drawings. "Did you make these all by yourself?" "Christine helped me with Biscuit's ears. I couldn't get them right." Chloe pointed proudly at the dog's floppy ears in the picture. "Do you like them?" "I love them. Can I keep this one?" Derek indicated the drawing of himself on the motorcycle. Chloe beamed. "Really? You really want to keep it?" "Absolutely. I'll put it up in my room." They spent the afternoon playing board games. Chloe was surprisingly competitive at Uno and reading books. Christine made hot chocolate again, and Robert told more stories from his teaching days. It was domestic and simple, and Derek found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't in years. That evening, Derek attended his first AA meeting in 3 years. The church basement was exactly like every other AA meeting space he'd ever been in. Folding chairs arranged in a circle, a table with coffee and stale cookies, posters with the 12 steps on the walls. About 15 people were present, ranging from college age to elderly. When it was his turn to speak, Derek stood up. "My name is Derek, and I'm an alcoholic. I've been sober for 2 years, but I've been running from my problems for 3. I lost custody of my daughter because I couldn't control my anger and my drinking. I'm here because I want to stop running and start facing what I've done. I'm here because I want to be someone my daughter can be proud of." The group welcomed him, and after the meeting, several people gave him their phone numbers and told him to call if he needed support. An older man named Vincent, who'd been sober for 12 years, offered to be his sponsor. "You've got the hardest part behind you, admitting you need help," Vincent said. "The next part is just showing up day after day and doing the work." Wednesday morning, Dr. Yamamoto's office called. She had an opening that afternoon due to a cancellation. Could Derek make it? He rearranged his work schedule and showed up at her office at 2 o'clock sharp. Dr. Helen Yamamoto was a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put Derek at ease. Her office was comfortable, with soft lighting and plants on the windowsill. "Valerie spoke very highly of you," Dr. Yamamoto began. "She said you did something remarkable for a child in need." "I just did what was right," Derek said. "Many people know what's right. Fewer actually do it, especially when it costs them something." She settled into her chair with a notepad. "Tell me about yourself, Derek. Start wherever you want." For the next 50 minutes, Derek talked. He talked about his marriage to Karen, about Amanda's birth, and those first few years when everything seemed perfect. He talked about his father's death, about how grief had turned to anger, anger to drinking, and drinking to violence, never directed at Karen or Amanda, but present nonetheless. Bar fights, destroyed property, arrests. He talked about the custody hearing, about Karen's testimony, about the moment the judge declared him an unfit father. And then I just left, Derek said. Bought a Harley, packed what fit in the saddlebags, and rode away. Spent 3 years going from town to town, taking cash jobs, sleeping in cheap motels, never staying anywhere long enough to form connections. What were you running from? Dr. Yamamoto asked. The pain, I guess. The shame of failing everyone who counted on me. And what made you stop running? Derek thought about Chloe's bruised face, about her small hand holding $15, about her desperate trust in a stranger. A little girl who needed someone to not fail her. Dr. Yamamoto nodded slowly. Derek, I want you to understand something. What you did for Chloe is admirable, but you can't heal your relationship with your own daughter by proxy. Chloe is not Amanda, and helping her doesn't erase what happened with your family. I know that. Do you? Because from what you're telling me, you've fixated on Chloe as a way to prove you're capable of being a good father figure. But the real work, the hard work, is going to be facing your own guilt, processing your grief over your father, and learning healthy coping mechanisms that don't involve running away or drinking. Derek felt defensive anger rising, but forced himself to acknowledge it and let it pass. So what do I do? You show up. Here, every week, at your AA meetings, in Chloe's life if that's what you've committed to. But most importantly, you show up for yourself, the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. She leaned forward. Are you ready to do that? Derek took a deep breath. Yes. Good. Then let's get started. Over the next 2 weeks, Derek established a routine. He worked at Bridgetown Cycles Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings. He visited Chloe at the Patterson house Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday afternoons. He attended AA meetings Tuesday and Thursday evenings. He saw Dr. Yamamoto every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. And slowly, painfully, he began to change. The nightmares came back. Memories of his father's funeral, of Karen's tears during the custody hearing, of Amanda asking why Daddy was so angry all the time. But instead of drowning them in alcohol or outrunning them on his Harley, Derek talked about them in therapy, shared them at AA meetings, and worked through them with Vincent's guidance. Chloe's case progressed. Greg Holloway was being held without bail, facing multiple felony charges. Jessica Mitchell was cooperating fully with the investigation and had enrolled in parenting classes focused on recognizing and preventing domestic abuse. The goal was family reunification, but it would take time, probably several months. Derek found an apartment on Southeast Stark Street, a small studio above a vintage clothing store, but it was clean and cheap, and most importantly, it was his. A real address, like Karen had asked for. He bought minimal furniture from a thrift store and hung Chloe's drawing of him on his motorcycle above his bed. He also started writing letters to Amanda, even though he couldn't send them yet. Dr. Yamamoto suggested it as an exercise in processing his feelings and clarifying what he wanted to say when the time came. The first letter was 6 pages long, full of apologies and explanations. By the 10th letter, he'd learned to be more concise, more honest, less defensive. Chloe continued to settle in with the Pattersons. She'd started 2nd grade at a nearby elementary school, and Robert helped her with homework every afternoon. She was seeing a child therapist twice a week to process her trauma. The bruise around her eye faded gradually, though Derek knew the invisible wounds would take much longer to heal. On Derek's 5th visit, Chloe asked, "Do you miss riding your motorcycle everywhere?" They were sitting on the Pattersons' back porch, watching Biscuit chase squirrels. Derek considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted, "there's a freedom in being on the road, not being tied to any place or person. But that freedom was also loneliness. Even if I didn't want to admit it, So you like being here better? Yeah, kiddo, I do. I'm glad you stayed, Chloe said, leaning against his side. You're my best friend. The simple declaration hit Derek harder than he expected. When was the last time anyone had called him a friend, let alone a best friend? When was the last time he'd let anyone close enough to matter? You're my best friend too, Derek said, and meant it. In his 6th therapy session, Dr. Yamamoto asked Derek what he ultimately wanted. I want to be someone Amanda can know, Derek said. Someone she can trust and maybe, eventually, love again. That's a good goal. But what do you want for yourself, separate from your daughter? Derek struggled with this question. For so long, his identity had been tied to his failures. Failed husband, failed father, failed man. The idea of wanting something just for himself felt foreign. I want to stop hating myself, he said finally. I want to wake up and not feel like a mistake. Then that's what we work toward, Dr. Yamamoto said. 6 weeks after their first meeting, Derek received a text from Valerie Kramer asking him to call her. When he did, her voice was serious. Derek, we have a court date scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Greg Holloway's attorney is pushing for a trial, claiming the abuse allegations are fabricated. Chloe is going to have to testify. Derek's stomach dropped. She's 7 years old. How can they make her testify? The court will take precautions. She can testify via closed-circuit TV, so she doesn't have to be in the same room as Greg, and she'll have support throughout the process. But Derek, she's been asking if you can be there. Of course I'll be there, whatever she needs. There's something else. The prosecutor wants to call you as a witness. You were the first person Chloe told about the abuse, and your testimony about her physical and emotional state that day could be crucial. Derek had never testified in court before, had never been involved in legal proceedings except as a defendant in his own custody case. The thought of sitting in a witness stand, of being cross-examined by a defense attorney trying to discredit him, was terrifying. But he'd made Chloe a promise. I'll do it, he said. The 2 weeks before the trial passed quickly. Derek spent extra time with Chloe, trying to keep things as normal as possible while she prepared for her testimony with the help of her therapist and the prosecutor's victim advocate. Jessica Mitchell, who Derek had met several times now, was a wreck of anxiety and guilt, but she was doing everything asked of her, attending therapy, completing parenting classes, and making it clear that Greg Holloway would never be welcome in their lives again. The night before the trial, Derek lay awake in his studio apartment, rehearsing what he would say on the stand. He wanted to get it right, wanted to make sure his testimony helped Chloe rather than hurt her. At 1:30 in the morning, he finally gave up on sleep and called Vincent, his AA sponsor. Can't sleep? Vincent asked, his voice rough but alert. Trials tomorrow? I'm testifying about what happened when Chloe came to me. And you're worried you'll mess it up. Yeah. Derek, you've been doing good work these past 6 weeks. You've shown up for every meeting, every therapy session, every visit with that little girl. You've proven you can be reliable. Tomorrow is just one more time to show up. What if my testimony isn't good enough? What if they don't convict him? Then you'll still be there for Chloe afterward, helping her through whatever comes next. That's all any of us can do. Show up and do our best. After hanging up, Derek finally managed to sleep for a few hours. He woke at dawn, showered, and put on the one set of decent clothes he owned, khaki pants and a button-down shirt he'd bought specifically for court appearances. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Clean-cut, sober, purposeful. When had he become this person? The courthouse was an imposing building in downtown Portland, all concrete and glass, with metal detectors at the entrance and security guards checking bags. Derek met Valerie and the Pattersons in the hallway outside the courtroom. Chloe was there too, wearing a blue dress that Christine had bought for her, her hair in neat braids. "Derek!" She ran to him and he caught her in a hug. "Hey, kiddo. You doing okay? I'm scared, she admitted. I know, but you're also brave. And I'm going to be right there in the courtroom the whole time, okay? If you get scared while you're talking, just look for me. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Amanda Chen, briefed Derek on what to expect. The defense attorney is going to try to suggest that Chloe's injuries could have come from something else, a fall, roughhousing with other kids. He'll probably imply that you're misremembering or that you had ulterior motives for helping her. Stay calm, stick to what you actually witnessed, and don't let him bait you into anger. I can do that, Derek said, though his heart was pounding. The courtroom was smaller than Derek expected, with wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and an American flag in the corner. Greg Holloway sat at the defense table, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Derek made in a month. He was a large man, maybe 40, with the kind of bland handsomeness that probably helped him manipulate people. When he glanced back at the gallery and saw Chloe, his expression remained neutral, but Derek saw calculation in his eyes. Jessica Mitchell sat in the front row, as far from Greg as possible. She looked smaller than Derek remembered, diminished by guilt and grief. When she saw Chloe, she started crying silently. The judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Morrison, called the court to order. The charges were read, multiple counts of felony child abuse. Greg pleaded not guilty. The prosecutor began her opening statement, laying out the evidence, medical documentation of Chloe's injuries, testimony from teachers who'd noticed changes in her behavior, and most importantly, Chloe's own account of the abuse. The defense attorney, a slick man named Richard Vance, countered that the case rested on the unreliable testimony of a young child who might have been coached, combined with circumstantial evidence that could be explained by normal childhood accidents. Derek was called to the stand mid-morning. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, then settled into the witness chair. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his breathing steady, a technique Dr. Yamamoto had taught him for managing anxiety. Prosecutor Chen approached with a reassuring smile. Mr. Thompson, can you please tell the court how you met Chloe Mitchell? Derek took a breath and began. He described that rainy October afternoon at the gas station, how Chloe had approached him, the visible bruise around her eye, her desperate plea for help. He described the $15 she'd offered him, the way her hands shook, the fear in her voice when she talked about Greg's threats. What did you do when Chloe told you about the abuse? Chen asked. I called Child Protective Services immediately. Then I stayed with her until CPS and the police arrived, because I didn't want her to be alone. Did Chloe show you any other injuries besides the bruise around her eye? Yes. She had bruises on her upper arms that looked like finger marks, like someone had grabbed her hard. And what was Chloe's emotional state during this encounter? She was terrified. She kept saying that Greg had threatened to hurt her worse if she told anyone what was happening. She was 7 years old, and she was so scared that she'd spent her last $15 trying to get a stranger to help her escape. Derek's voice cracked slightly on the last words, and he saw several jurors lean forward with interest. He was telling the truth, completely and without embellishment, and the raw emotion behind his words made it compelling. Chen asked a few more clarifying questions, then yielded to the defense. Richard Vance approached with a predatory smile. Mr. Thompson, you describe yourself as a motorcycle enthusiast, is that correct? I ride a Harley, yes. In fact, you've been essentially homeless for the past 3 years, traveling from town to town, working cash jobs, correct? Derek felt his jaw tighten. I haven't had a permanent address, if that's what you're asking. And you have a criminal record, don't you? Multiple arrests for assault? Bar fights from years ago, yes, misdemeanors. I paid my fines and did my community service. So you're a transient with a history of violence who happened to be at a gas station when a young girl approached you. Isn't it possible that you misinterpreted an innocent situation? That a child with an injury from a playground accident asked you for help and you jumped to conclusions? No, Derek said firmly. Chloe told me exactly what happened. She described how Greg hit her, how he threatened her, how he'd been abusing her for months. Those weren't conclusions I jumped to. Those were facts she told me. Facts or a story she'd been coached to tell. Objection, Chen stood. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Morrison said. Vance changed tactics. Mr. Thompson, you mentioned you have a daughter you don't have custody of. Isn't it true that you lost custody due to anger issues and substance abuse? Derek felt heat rising in his face, but he forced himself to stay calm. This was exactly what Chen had warned him about, the attempt to discredit him by attacking his character. Yes, I lost custody of my daughter. And yes, I had problems with anger and alcohol. But I've been sober for 2 years, and I'm currently in therapy and attending AA meetings. How convenient that you've suddenly become a responsible citizen right when your testimony is needed in this case. Objection! Chen was on her feet again, argumentative and not a question. Sustained. Mr. Vance, ask questions or sit down. Vance tried a few more angles, suggesting Derek had financial motivations, implying he was seeking attention, but Derek stuck to the simple truth of what he'd witnessed. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, Vance finally dismissed him. Derek returned to his seat in the gallery, his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. Christine Patterson patted his shoulder supportively, and when Derek looked at Chloe, she gave him a small thumbs up. The prosecution called several other witnesses throughout the day. The emergency room doctor who'd examined Chloe, her second-grade teacher who testified about behavioral changes, the police officer who'd arrested Greg. Each piece of testimony built a damning picture of systematic abuse. But the most important testimony came after lunch, when Chloe took the stand. The judge had approved closed-circuit TV, so Chloe testified from a separate room with only the prosecutor, a victim advocate, and a camera present. The jury watched her on a screen, and her small face filled the monitor, nervous but determined. Prosecutor Chen guided her through the testimony gently. Chloe, do you know why we're here today? To tell the truth about Greg. That's right. And I need you to tell us what happened at your house. Can you do that? Chloe nodded. Then in a small but steady voice, she described months of abuse. She described the first time Greg hit her for being too loud, the escalating violence, the threats that kept her silent. She described the morning she'd decided to run, how she'd taken her saved allowance and snuck out while Greg slept, how she'd seen Derek at the gas station and known somehow that he would help her. Why did you think Derek would help you? Chen asked. Because he looked sad, Chloe said. Like he knew what it was like to hurt. And I thought maybe someone who hurt before would understand. Derek felt tears stinging his eyes. The simple, heartbreaking wisdom of a 7-year-old who'd learned to read pain in strangers' faces. The cross-examination was harder to watch. Vance couldn't question Chloe as aggressively as he had Derek. The judge shut down several attempts, but he still tried to poke holes in her story. Couldn't she have gotten those bruises from falling? Wasn't it possible she was exaggerating because she was mad at Greg for disciplining her? Hadn't her mother's boyfriend been nothing but kind to her? But Chloe held firm. No, she said to each suggestion. Greg hurt me. He hit me and he scared me, and he said he would hurt me worse if I told. But I told anyway because Derek said people would listen. When Chloe's testimony concluded, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom except Greg Holloway's. He sat stone-faced at the defense table, occasionally whispering to his attorney, showing no remorse whatsoever. The trial lasted 3 days total. The defense tried to present Greg as a devoted boyfriend who'd been helping raise his girlfriend's daughter, who'd never had any complaints against him before, who was being railroaded by a flawed investigation and coached testimony. They called character witnesses who testified that Greg had always seemed like a nice guy. But the prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. The medical documentation, the photographs of injuries, the testimony from multiple witnesses, and most damning of all, Chloe's own clear, consistent account of what had happened to her. On the third day, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Greg Holloway's face finally showed emotion when the verdict was read. A flash of rage that confirmed everything Derek had believed about the man. Judge Morrison scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later and remanded Greg to custody without bail. Outside the courtroom, Jessica Mitchell collapsed into sobs of relief. Valerie hugged her, and Christine wrapped an arm around Chloe, who looked exhausted but lighter somehow, as if a tremendous weight had been lifted. Derek stood apart, feeling like an outsider to this family moment. But then Chloe extracted herself from Christine's embrace and ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "We won," she said. "You were right. People did listen. You won, kiddo. You were so brave in there. I'm proud of you. Will you still visit me now that the trial is over?" The question revealed the fear that had been lurking beneath Chloe's relief. The worry that Derek had only stayed because he had to, because he was needed for the trial, and now he'd leave like everyone else had left her. Derek crouched down to her level, placing his hands on her shoulders. "Chloe Mitchell, I made you a promise at that gas station 6 weeks ago. I said I wouldn't leave you, and I meant it. The trial is over, but I'm still here. I'll be here for as long as you want me around." "Forever?" Derek smiled. "Yeah, kiddo. Forever." The weeks after the trial brought unexpected changes. Greg Holloway was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with additional years for the threats he'd made. Jessica Mitchell completed her parenting classes and therapy program, and after 3 months of supervision, Chloe was returned to her mother's custody. The reunion was emotional and complicated, both mother and daughter carrying scars from what had happened, but committed to healing together. Derek continued his routine: work at Bridgetown Cycles, which had become full-time employment with benefits, AA meetings twice a week, therapy every Wednesday, and regular visits with Chloe and Jessica. The apartment above the vintage clothing store had become a real home, with furniture that matched and groceries in the fridge, and Chloe's drawings covering one entire wall. 4 months after the trial, Derek received an email from Karen. It was brief. "You've kept your promise about therapy and AA. Dr. Yamamoto sent verification, as did your sponsor. Amanda is willing to exchange letters if you are." Derek's hands shook as he read the email. He immediately went to his desk and pulled out the stack of letters he'd been writing. Dozens of them now, chronicling his journey from broken biker to something resembling a functional adult. He selected 3 that felt most honest and appropriate, put them in an envelope addressed to Amanda Thompson in care of Karen's address, and mailed them before he could second-guess himself. 2 weeks later, a response arrived. Amanda's handwriting was careful and neat, the letters slightly large, the way kids' writing was. She told him about school, about her friends, about the soccer team she'd joined. She didn't mention his absence or the reasons he'd left. She just wrote about her life, as if testing whether he was safe enough to let in. Derek wrote back immediately, matching her tone, light, informative, asking questions about her interests. They began exchanging letters every 2 weeks, gradually building a tentative connection across the miles. Dr. Yamamoto called this progress scaffolding, building a structure strong enough to eventually support the weight of a real relationship. Derek liked the metaphor. He was good with his hands, good at building things. Maybe he could be good at building this too. 6 months after the trial, Chloe's 8th birthday arrived. Jessica threw a party at their apartment, a modest affair with a few of Chloe's school friends, homemade cake, and decorations from the dollar store. Derek was invited, along with the Pattersons, who'd remained close with the family even after Chloe moved back home. Derek arrived with a present he'd been working on for weeks, a custom-built balance bike he'd assembled from scratch at the shop, painted Chloe's favorite color purple, with her name stenciled on the frame in silver letters. When Chloe saw it, she screamed with delight. "Derek, it's perfect. Did you really make this yourself?" "Every piece," he confirmed. "Chuck at the shop helped me get the parts wholesale. Can I ride it now, please?" They spent an hour in the parking lot behind the apartment building, Derek running alongside while Chloe learned to balance on her new bike, her laughter echoing off the buildings. Other kids from the party joined in, and soon Derek found himself supervising an impromptu race course he'd marked out with chalk. Later, after cake and presents, after the other guests had left and Chloe was showing the Pattersons her new bike, Jessica approached Derek. "Can we talk for a minute?" she asked. They stepped out onto the small balcony of her apartment. The Portland skyline stretched out before them, lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. "I never properly thanked you," Jessica said, "for saving my daughter, for staying when you could have just walked away." "You've thanked me plenty," Derek said. "No, I haven't. Not really. Derek, you gave up your whole life for a kid you didn't know. You got a job, an apartment, went to therapy, all because you made Chloe a promise. That's not something I can ever repay. I didn't do it for repayment. And honestly," Derek paused, choosing his words carefully, "I think Chloe saved me just as much as I saved her, maybe more." Jessica smiled, wiping at her eyes. "She loves you, you know. She talks about you constantly. Derek said this. Derek showed me that. You're like the father she never had." The words hit Derek hard. "I'm not trying to replace anyone or overstep. I know. That's what makes it okay." Jessica turned to face him. "Chloe's biological father left before she was born. He wanted nothing to do with being a parent. And then I brought Greg into our lives and..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "That wasn't your fault," Derek said firmly. "Greg fooled you. He fooled everyone. You're a good mother, Jessica. You work yourself to exhaustion taking care of Chloe. You just didn't see what was happening behind your back. I should have seen it. Maybe. But you see it now, and you've done everything right since. That's what matters." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights. Then Jessica said, "I want you to know that you're welcome in Chloe's life for as long as you want to be there. Not as a witness or a family friend, but as someone important to her. Someone she can count on." "I want that too," Derek said. 8 months after the trial, Derek received a phone call from Karen. "Amanda wants to video chat with you," she said without preamble. "Are you ready for that?" Derek's heart jumped into his throat. "When?" "This Saturday at 2 o'clock. I'll be in the room with her and we're setting a 30-minute time limit for the first call. If it goes well, we can talk about more." Saturday took forever to arrive. Derek cleaned his apartment 3 times, bought a new shirt, got a haircut. He set up his laptop at his small kitchen table with Chloe's drawings visible on the wall behind him. He wanted Amanda to see that he'd been doing something worthwhile with his life. At exactly 2 o'clock, his laptop chimed with an incoming call. Derek's hand shook as he clicked accept. Amanda's face filled the screen. She was 9 now, almost 10, with Karen's dark hair and Derek's blue eyes. She looked so much older than the 6-year-old he'd last seen in person. She was beautiful and healthy and alive, and Derek felt overwhelming gratitude that she turned out okay despite his failures. "Hi," Amanda said shyly. "Hi, sweetheart. You look so grown up. You look different too. You cut your hair." "Yeah, and my beard." Trying to look more respectable. Derek smiled nervously. "How was school this week?" They talked awkwardly at first, both hyper-aware of the camera and Karen's presence just off screen, but gradually the conversation found a rhythm. Amanda told him about her soccer team's winning streak, about the book she was reading for English class, about her best friend's upcoming birthday party. Derek told her about his job at Bridgetown Cycles, about Portland's rainy weather, and carefully about Chloe. "So you're kind of like her big brother?" Amanda asked when Derek explained his relationship with Chloe. Derek hadn't thought of it that way, but it fit. "Yeah, I guess I am." "That's cool. She's lucky to have you." The words were simple, but coming from his daughter, they meant everything. The 30-minute call stretched to 45 before Karen gently intervened, reminding them they'd talk again soon. After hanging up, Derek sat at his kitchen table for a long time, processing what had just happened. He'd talked to his daughter. She'd smiled at him. She'd said he was cool. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a beginning. That evening, Derek had dinner with Chloe and Jessica. They'd fallen into a routine of cooking together once a week, Derek handling anything that needed grilling or frying, while Jessica managed the side dishes, and Chloe set the table and provided commentary on everyone's cooking technique. "You seem happy tonight," Chloe observed as they ate spaghetti at Jessica's small dining table. "I talked to my daughter today, first time in almost 4 years." "Really?" Jessica looked up with genuine pleasure. "Derek, that's wonderful. How did it go?" "Better than I expected. We're taking it slow, but it was good. Really good." "See," Chloe said triumphantly, "I told you everything would work out if you stayed." Derek laughed. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just didn't notice because I'm short." After dinner, while Jessica did dishes, Derek and Chloe sat on the couch looking at photos on Jessica's laptop. Chloe was working on a school project about her family and wanted Derek's help choosing which pictures to include. "Can I use this one?" She pointed to a photo from her birthday party. Derek and Chloe standing next to the purple bike, both grinning at the camera. "Of course, but that's not really a family photo." Chloe looked at him with an expression of exaggerated patience. "Derek, you're at our house like 3 times a week. You come to my school stuff. You help with my homework. You're family." Derek didn't know how to respond. He looked to Jessica, who'd emerged from the kitchen and was smiling softly. "She's right," Jessica said. "You're family, Derek. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but in every way that matters." Derek felt his throat tighten with emotion. A year ago, he'd been a man with no family, no home, no purpose beyond running from his pain. Now he had a job he liked, a daughter who was willing to talk to him, and a 7-year-old who considered him family. "Yeah," Derek said finally, "I guess I am." 1 year after the trial, Derek organized a celebration. He rented space at a community center, invited everyone who'd been part of the journey. The Pattersons, Valerie Kramer, Chuck from the shop, Vincent and several people from his AA group, Jessica's friends from the hospital, Chloe's classmates and their parents. Even Dr. Yamamoto made an appearance, smiling at the transformation in her patient. The party had no specific occasion. It wasn't anyone's birthday or any particular anniversary. Derek just wanted to gather everyone who'd helped him build a new life and say thank you. Halfway through the party, Chloe climbed onto a chair and clinked a spoon against her juice glass to get everyone's attention. "Excuse me, I want to say something." The room quieted, all eyes turning to the 8-year-old standing on the chair. "1 year ago, something really bad was happening to me," Chloe said, her voice clear and confident. "But then I met Derek, and he helped me. He didn't have to, but he did. And he stayed, even when it was hard, and even when he probably wanted to leave. Because of Derek, I'm safe now. Because of Derek, I learned that asking for help is brave, not weak. Because of Derek, I know that family isn't just people you're related to, it's people who show up for you." She turned to look directly at Derek. "So, thank you, Derek. Thank you for being my family." The room erupted in applause. Derek felt tears streaming down his face and didn't bother wiping them away. Chloe jumped down from the chair and ran to him, and he picked her up in a fierce hug. "Thank you for letting me stay, kiddo," Derek whispered. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Derek had helped Jessica clean up, he rode his Harley through the quiet Portland streets. The city had become familiar now. He knew which roads to take to avoid traffic, which neighborhoods came alive at night, where the best coffee was sold. He rode past the Extra Mile gas station on 122nd Avenue, where everything had started. On impulse, Derek pulled into the parking lot and killed his engine. He sat on his bike in the exact spot where he'd been filling his tank when Chloe approached him. A year ago, he'd been a man running from everything. Tonight, he was a man riding home. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Amanda. "Mom says I can call you once a week now instead of just letters and monthly video chats. Is that okay?" Derek's response was immediate. "More than okay. I'd love that." A second text followed. "Good. Also, Mum says maybe we can visit Portland for Thanksgiving if you want." Derek stared at the message, hardly believing what he was reading. Karen was considering bringing Amanda to Portland, to meet him in person, to see the life he'd built. "I want that very much," he typed back. "More than anything." He sat in the gas station parking lot for a few more minutes, remembering the frightened 7-year-old with $15 and a desperate plan. Remembering his own brokenness, his certainty that he had nothing to offer anyone. Chloe had seen something in him that day, some spark of goodness that he'd buried under years of anger and shame and running. She'd trusted him when she had no reason to, and that trust had changed everything. Derek started his Harley and rode toward his apartment, toward home. Tomorrow, he'd work at the shop, attend his AA meeting, maybe take Chloe to the park if the weather was nice. Ordinary days, ordinary routines, but they were his days, his routines, his life. He wasn't running anymore. 3 months later, Derek stood in Portland International Airport, his heart pounding as he watched passengers emerge from the arrival gate. He dressed carefully, nice jeans, a button-down shirt, his good leather jacket. He held a sign that said, "Amanda," even though he'd recognize his daughter anywhere. And then he saw her. Taller than in the video chats, wearing a purple hoodie and carrying a backpack. Karen walked beside her, protective, but allowing Amanda to lead. Amanda saw Derek and stopped. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the crowded terminal. Then, slowly, Amanda smiled. It was a small smile, tentative and unsure, but it was real. Derek lowered the sign and opened his arms, not presuming, just offering. Amanda looked up at Karen, who nodded. Then she walked forward, closing the distance between them, and let her father hug her for the first time in nearly 4 years. "Hi, Dad," Amanda whispered. "Hi, sweetheart. Welcome to Portland." They had a long way to go, years of hurt to process, trust to rebuild, a relationship to reconstruct from scratch. But they had time. Derek wasn't going anywhere. That evening, Derek brought Amanda and Karen to Jessica's apartment for dinner. Chloe had been nervous all day, worried that Derek's real daughter wouldn't like her, wouldn't understand their relationship. But when Amanda walked in and saw the purple bike Derek had built for Chloe, she immediately asked about it. And the two girls started talking about bikes and soccer and school projects. Over dinner, Derek looked around the table, Jessica telling a funny story from the hospital, making everyone laugh. Chloe and Amanda debating whether purple or blue was a better color. Karen watching him with cautious approval, seeing the man he'd become, this strange, cobbled-together family that had formed from crisis and choice. A year and a half ago, Derek had been filling his gas tank, planning to ride north toward nowhere in particular. A little girl with a black eye had offered him $15 and changed everything. "Derek?" Chloe's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Are you okay? You look sad." "Not sad," Derek said, smiling. Just thinking about how lucky I am. Because of me? Chloe asked hopefully. Yeah, kiddo, because of you. After dinner, while the girls played a board game and the adults talked over coffee, Derek excused himself to the balcony for a moment of air. Karen followed him out. You've really done it, she said, looking out at the city lights. You've built a real life here. I had help, Derek said. A lot of help. Still, you did the work. You showed up every day, even when it was hard. That's not easy. No, it's not. But it's worth it. Karen was quiet for a moment. Amanda wants to spend part of her summer here. Would that be okay? Are you serious? I've been watching you, Derek. Through the video calls, through Dr. Yamamoto's reports, through the way Amanda talks about you. You're different. You're the man I thought I was marrying all those years ago. I don't know about that, Derek said. I'm just trying to be better than I was. That's all any of us can do. Karen touched his arm gently. We'll work out the details, but yes, I think it's time for you and Amanda to have more time together. Real time, not just phone calls. Derek felt overwhelming gratitude and terror in equal measure. I won't let her down. I know. That's why I'm saying yes. Later, after Karen and Amanda had gone to their hotel and Derek was helping Jessica clean up, Chloe appeared in the kitchen doorway, already in her pajamas. Is Amanda coming back? She asked. Yeah, she might spend part of the summer here. Good, I like her, she's nice. Chloe yawned. Derek? Yeah? Do you ever think about that day at the gas station, when I gave you the $15? All the time, kiddo. Me too. I was so scared that day. I thought nobody would help me, but you did. Derek crouched down to her level. You were brave that day, Chloe. You saved yourself. I just helped a little. We saved each other, Chloe said wisely. That's what families do. She hugged him goodnight, then padded off to her room. Derek stood in Jessica's kitchen, listening to the sounds of domesticity. Dishes clattering, water running, a child settling into bed, and felt peace settle over him like a blanket. He pulled out his wallet and looked at the $15 he'd been carrying for over a year. Chloe had told him to keep it safe, that she'd want it back someday. But Derek knew now that she'd already gotten back everything that money represented, her safety, her childhood, her ability to trust. Maybe he'd give it back to her when she graduated high school, or maybe when she got married, or maybe he'd frame it and hang it on his wall, a reminder of the moment his life changed direction. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Thanks for dinner. Chloe is really cool. See you tomorrow. Definitely, Derek typed back. Sleep well. He pocketed his phone and the $15, then helped Jessica finish cleaning up. Tomorrow he'd take Amanda and Chloe to Powell's Books, Portland's famous independent bookstore. The next day, they'd ride the Max train downtown and walk along the waterfront. Small moments, ordinary activities, building memories one day at a time. Derek Thompson had spent 3 years running from his failures. Then a 7-year-old girl with a black eye and $15 had given him a reason to stop. He'd been standing still ever since, and it was the best decision he'd ever made.